The laning phase of Heroes of Newerth is quite possibly one of the most distinct and recognizable phases in the game. It's the time when you and maybe one other person occupy a lane against other heroes without leaving the lane as often as you will later. I've heard some people say that the laning phase is the boring phase of HoN, the time where nothing really happens and there's nothing really to learn or talk about, but this is far from the truth. In reality, the laning phase has so many things to talk about, I'm probably going to miss a lot of things, so I apologize for that in advance. The laning phase might not start when you pick heroes, but it is certainly a product of it. I don't want to talk too much about picking heroes because that's a whole other topic I could write a guide on, but instead I just want to briefly mention the basics. The golden rule of thumb for picking heroes to lane together is that you don't want two melee heroes together in a lane. When picking heroes, count how many melee heroes your team has already, factor in who will solo and who will jungle, and try to avoid a double melee lane. Another good rule of thumb is to observe that you don't have two heroes who both have a carry component in the same lane, even if one is ranged and one is melee. Heroes that can carry will want to be scoring most of the last hits, and as such you shouldn't really have two people fighting over them. Whether or not you will be last hitting enemy creeps depends on your hero priority. Generally, the hero with a carry component is going to want most of the last hits unless he's not able to. For this reason, the person who is supporting the hero with the carry component will want to focus more on denying. The best and most basic example for this is a lane with a ranged babysitter support hero and a melee hard carry hero. In this situation, a melee hard carry is going to want to be last hitting everything he can, and the range is going to be trying to deny everything he can. Of course, this is the most basic and extreme scenario, and things might always be this black and white. Sometimes support heroes will need to score a few last hits to make ends meet to purchase important items like wards, but this shouldn't happen that often. When last hitting, animation cancelling is your best friend. Once your attack lands or your projectile is in the air, you can tell your hero to back off to avoid getting hit by both enemy heroes or creeps if you attacked a hero. In addition to denying, harassing is an important job of the ranged hero, regardless of if he is a babysitter or not. Harassing actually does three things at once. First and foremost, it damages the enemy heroes, reducing their life and making future ganks possible. Secondly, harassing forces the enemy heroes to back off and gives the person last hitting in your lane more room to score last hits. Thirdly, harassing enemy heroes will often cause the enemy creeps to attack you, moving them closer to you in your tower, making them easier to last hit. When laning, it's important to virtually never auto-attack unless you have a team specialized for pushing early. By auto-attacking, you are not only ruining your chances of last hitting creeps, but you also are causing the enemy creeps to die faster than your creeps, moving the creep wave closer to the enemy base. This creates a dangerous situation for you, because early in the laning phase your tower is your best friend when it comes to protection from ganks, and the further away you are from your own tower, the more room the enemy heroes will have to come and sneak up from behind and gank you. Don't be fooled, having the enemy creeps near your tower is not necessarily a bad thing as long as it isn't sustaining a lot of damage. In the top and bottom lane for Hellborn and Legion respectively, creeps can be pulled into the lane. Generally you want one person to stay in the lane and continue his work as normal while the other person pulls the creeps. Pulling creeps is great, not only for the money, but it also gives a temporary boost of experience rate in your lane, because the person who is still in the lane will now receive full experience from the enemy creeps, while you will receive full experience from the neutral creeps. When laning, it's good to think of the lanes as constant experience dispensers. If two people or more are in a lane, experience is always divided evenly, but if nobody is in the lane, all that experience is essentially wasted, spilled into the gutter. For this reason, it's vital that you stay in your lane whenever you are not doing anything important. A lot of new players tend to run back to the fountain way too often to heal. Walking back to the fountain early on during the laning phase, especially without boots, takes excruciatingly long and should be avoided at all costs. Instead, always make sure that you have a courier on your team, and you can have it send you items without having to go back yourself and heal. Health potions are a cheap way to save yourself a trip to the fountain, and clarity potions can keep you from running dry on mana. I should note that the experience range is much larger than people think. It's about 1,000 units, meaning that often you don't even need to put yourself in harm's way to be getting experience. A flying quarry can also be used to ferry your bottle back and forth in your base to refill it. This strategy works great if you have a bottle but you're in a side lane and can't get any tablets, or if your enemy is flat out getting all the tablets before you. When leaving the base at level 1, I should note that you should never purchase boots as your first item. It's a common mistake a lot of players make. When leaving the base early, you are usually purchasing two things: ways to increase your auto-attack damage to make last hitting easier in the form of cheap stats, or consumables. Minor totems are the cheapest and most effective way of boosting your early game damage, and runes of the blight or health potions should also usually be bought. Mana Battery deserves a special mention here, as the most overpowered item in the game, mostly due to its low cost and easy components. If you're going to pick up 2 minor totems early, making a mana battery is likely to be in your best interest. Tablets are an important tool of the laning phase, especially for the solo hero who's usually in the middle lane because it gives him a way to gank the other lanes, especially with a bottle. Someone should always purchase wards in the beginning of the game, and one of them should always be used to ward the tablet. Every 2 minutes a tablet will spawn at one spot, so if it doesn't spawn at the place that you warded, it'll probably be at the other side of the river. Homecoming stones are another item that people don't appreciate. In addition to being a great way to escape from enemy ganks while juking, they're even more practical uses to teleport to towers to save dying teammates. Teleporting to towers can save your teammate's life even if you don't have any mana to actually help. Just the beam of light can be enough to intimidate an enemy hero enough to not tower dive. Teleporting to help a lane even if the action is going on fairly far away from the tower can often score you some of the easiest kills you'll ever get, simply because odds are enemy heroes will be low on HP and completely out of mana from fighting your own team. Calling missing, of course, is something I should mention. Nothing goes over voice chat, simply because it gets people's attention easier than typing. You should try not to rely on missing calls, though, and always be wary when you find yourself further away from your own tower. When you know an enemy hero is jungling, it is important not to forget about them under any circumstances. In addition to expected ganks at all times from heroes like Ophelia or Wild Soul, you should also take the time to gank them. When your lane is pushed or enemy heroes simply aren't present for a while, go into the forest with you and a teammate and search for the jungling hero. Staying together can maximize the element of surprise. Now, I'm not going to go over all the juking spots there are in the lanes, but in particular the woods behind both the top and bottom tower for Hellborn and Legion both offer juking paths with more than one exit. During the laning phase, mana is also to be used sparingly on most heroes. While some heroes have spells like Sage's Lower that can be spammed to harass, most spells should be saved for clutch moments. Heroes like Hammerstorm don't have a lot of mana but have powerful stuns that, when used at the right time in the laning phase, can score you some easy kills. In particular, the harsh lanes where you're getting dominated, it is important to let your team know ahead of time. Nobody likes a hard carry who has been secretly free farming the lane because you didn't tell anybody how badly the laning phase was going. Telling your teammates ahead of time that you need assistance or possibly a lane switch can help set up early game ganks and save yourself a lot of grief in the long run. When people come to gank your lane, always assist them. Don't make it obvious that a gank is about to happen by getting cocky and suddenly becoming aggressive. Remain passive and submissive until the gank arrives, at which point you can run in guns blazing.